Okay, so first, a hedge. The topic I'm going to discuss today is very interesting and very closely related to other topics in the series, although the issues I'm going to discuss today are somewhat beyond my core field of expertise, so please take this with a grain of salt. What is the meaning of life? Many of us may be inclined to accept the humanist perspective and think that we can understand the meaning of life for ourselves. So we can make a conscious decision on what goals to pursue and then pursue those goals accordingly. Now, this may be an illusion, so it may turn out that we cannot really pick those goals freely, but okay, let's enjoy this illusion for a while, and let's say we have this freedom of choice. So what kind of goals would you like to pursue? After some deliberation, many of us would be inclined to find the unoriginal conclusion that the goal of life is to be happy, is to seek happiness, life satisfaction, self-fulfillment, self-actualization, and so on. So is this a good answer? In a way, it seems like a good answer, but upon inspection, actually, it isn't. The main problem with this answer is that it's kind of circular. So think about happiness, for example. What makes you happy? Okay, what are the factors behind happiness? And it quickly turns out that it's a mixture of two things. First of all, you have this unconscious component, which is like the hormones in your body. So you would like to have a sufficiently high level of oxytocin, of serotonin. You would like to have your immediate levels of endorphins sufficiently high, and that could make you happy. But that's something that you don't have much control over. What is more interesting, perhaps, is what is your innate structure of goals. Upon inspection, you would say that perhaps you would like to be successful at pursuing your goals. But what are these goals, right? So in the end, you come up with the conclusion that most of what makes you happy is success in pursuing your goals, whatever those goals are. So if your goal is to be happy, then being happy means succeeding in pursuing the goal. It brings you back to square one. So maybe it's not that easy to understand what the goals in life are if you are trying to understand that only by introspection. So as I argued in a separate episode, maybe it's better to take a different approach. Maybe it's better to consider the human history, to consider the actions that humans have taken over the centuries and try to infer from those actions what the underlying motives might have been so that they could lead to these kind of actions. And as I argued before, in this regard, it's a very interesting approach to talk about local control maximization. To talk about the instrumental convergence thesis, which leads to 4 auxiliary goals to be pursued. Okay, you would like to survive, you would like to seek resources, you would like to be efficient in what you're doing, and you would like to be creative. So the totality of these 4 things is local control maximization, as I argued before. So the bottom line of this argument is that maybe we will never be able to find out what the true goals of our lives are, but we would still make sure that indeed we satisfy the criteria for the instrumental convergence thesis, and therefore we pursue local control. How does this link to religion? In my perspective, there is a nice link there because we are limited in our forces. We are limited in our abilities to reach our goals. We seek local control maximization, but we don't always succeed. Quite often it is the case that we fail. We fail because there is something intrinsically random happening over which no one can ever have control. We also fail because we're just too limited in our forces, and perhaps one day we could be able to have this kind of influence on environment that we would like to have, but at this moment we cannot. And finally, quite often it could be the case that we just don't understand. So we would like to influence our surroundings, but we don't understand how they work, and we don't understand how we could have potentially this sort of influence. And all these lead to demand for unsubstantiated claims, for beliefs on insufficient evidence. So we would like to do something, we don't know how it works, we don't know how to succeed. We would like to experiment. Okay, so we experiment, we do things in various ways. Most of the time it doesn't work. If the task is difficult, probably it will never work. But sometimes, by the sheer number of trials, we come across something that seems to work somewhat. Okay, there is some correlation. If you run hypotheses many times, and you always get some spurious correlation. Even if something that doesn't work at all, it seems for a while that it works. So you can build a theory around this, unsubstantiated and not grounded in true evidence, but for a while it would seem to work. The other thing is that you may also like to coerce others. So you would like to convince others that your belief is grounded in truth, even though it may be not grounded in any truth at all. And if some people succeed in convincing others that their story is reliable and coerce them to act on these beliefs, then we have an advantage in terms of cooperation or coordination. And so people's actions become more successful. People could cooperate more efficiently if they shared the common beliefs. And whether the beliefs were true or not was secondary. The other thing is that in most of the religions that we know, they had some mechanism of reducing violence, reducing crimes of various sorts. So like in Christianity you have the Ten Commandments, for example. And is this a universal phenomenon? My answer in this regard is that among people, yes it is. Among other species, we don't have that evidence, but we also have the evidence that the other species have not gone through the cognitive revolution. So there may be a reason why this mechanism of creating fictitious beliefs that are shared and form eventually religions are not found among other species. Now I would like to tell you something about human knowledge. I think it's an interesting model to think about human knowledge in the following way. Think about the whole universe of knowledge you can ever potentially have. Omega. Like the set of all sets. Doesn't exist, but okay, the set of all knowledge that we can one day potentially have as humans. Now, within the set, there is a set of knowledge that we already have, of the scientific evidence that we have already gathered and theorized about and built a coherent story about how the world works. Okay? There is a set of things we know. Around this set, there is a set of mysteries, things that we don't know, but we would like to know. Okay? So things that we don't know, but we know how to ask questions about them. And now, as time goes by, as science progresses, the set of knowledge that we have expands, and the set of mysteries is pushed forward. Okay? So we resolve many mysteries, but as we resolve them, we learn to ask new questions, and based on these new questions, we form new mysteries. So the set of mysteries is the natural place where gods reside. This set of mysteries is where you would put the God of the gaps, the residual God, okay? Why would you like to have a God there? Well, the reason is that you would like to have control over the surroundings, would like to have to control the world, the environment, and you cannot control everything, and in particular when you don't understand certain things, and you would like to understand them, you build these fictitious explanations which are supernatural, which refer to religious terms, to deities. You assign agency to those deities. You think that if you communicate with those fictitious deities, you would actually have more control. So this is a clear mechanism why we so generally form this sort of beliefs. But now here comes the paradox. Science advances and pushes the mysteries ahead. And And now, as these mysteries are pushed ahead, they are no longer there where they used to be. And what does this imply? It implies that the original religious stories, original religious beliefs need to be updated, need to be edited to be in line, to be consistent with the new evidence. And it seems that for millennia, it has exactly been the case. Before writing, people were just communicating their beliefs, their stories orally, okay, from generation to generation. And so there was ample room for edits. You could, like smoothly, like a game of telephone, edit out the issues that were no longer a mystery, add on new issues that became a mystery in the meanwhile. And also progress at that time was very slow, so this was not a big deal. But things changed after writing. After the invention of writing, many civilizations have written holy scripts. So you have the Old and New Testaments in Christianity, you have the Quran in Islam, you have the Vedas of the Hindu religion, you have the Sutras of the Buddhist religion. So you have all these holy scripts. This fictitious belief that was formed across centuries was codified, was written down in stone, in paper, copied and spread. And what that implied was much, much more difficult to do any edits anymore. At some point, these fictitious beliefs solidify as dogma. And what do I mean by dogma? Well, there is a very important difference between dogma and scientific knowledge. So the key difference is in falsifiability. Science, of course, doesn't know everything. Science puts forward hypotheses, but the beautiful thing about that is that these hypotheses need to be verifiable, need to be falsifiable. So you would have to be able to tell that, okay, the data don't confirm this, we have to scrap it. And that's how science progresses. We scrap many hypotheses that seemed nice but actually didn't work. It's different in religion. It's also sometimes different in sciences, which is a problem with sciences. Like in religion, clearly it's not about falsifiability. You would have to make sure that your dogma is not falsifiable. You would build layers over layers of unfalsifiable hypotheses, which you would have to accept by sheer belief, without any evidence. That's the essence of religion. But as I understand it, it's also its main weakness, because the reason why they emerged in the first place was our wish to have more control. If the dogma eventually doesn't have any resemblance to the world, this doesn't succeed in fulfilling his goal, in attaining more control over the world. And also science accelerated, slowly but surely increased the pace of development. That created a conflict. So how was this conflict resolved? Apparently you have two options. Okay, one option is to suppress progress. Okay, one option is to say that, okay, these are the holy scripts, this is the epiphany, this is the truth that has been revealed to us by gods, and it doesn't allow any edits. What it means that if you have scientific discoveries, you have theories that are well grounded in facts, but they contradict this holy script, they will be suppressed. The authors would have a hard time. The extreme of that was the witch hunt and heresy trials. Another reason why this was a welcome way of proceeding is that religions cemented as a source of power. Structures of power were built around that, and I mean real political power and real wealth. So that was one way, and it lasted quite long, and probably one of the reasons why the Middle Ages were so long was because science could not progress as fast as it could have been if not for religious constraints. Anyway, the world has passed through the scientific revolution eventually, and then the discrepancy between the knowledge of the world and the religious dogmas has become more and more apparent. During the last centuries, or especially the last century in particular, we've been seeing a resurgence of edits in Holy Scripts. Even though formally there are no edits, in fact, people who claim to be believers but at the same time claim to be civilized modern people, they would say, oh, don't look at that part, that is obsolete. don't read this, concentrate on this part is modern, okay? So it seems like, you're doing the edits even though you're not admitting you're doing the edits. So we're returning basically to this God of the gaps approach. Those who claim to be faithful, they put the God in the places where there are still remaining mysteries in our knowledge of the world. So in this way, old beliefs are somehow respected and not overturned completely. As a final note, I would like to add that dogmas are actually present not only in religious contexts. Dogmas are also built to keep power. So structures of power are quite often built around dogmas. And in fact, you can also have dogmas in science, especially in some fields of science where there is a bigger distance from the observable facts to the existing theories. What do I mean by that? Well, you can actually think about complexity. So you could say that basically the whole universe is governed by the rules of physics, but then as a subroutine of the laws of physics, you have the biological life. Biology is very complex, so it's like a complex structure built on the basic structure of physics. And then if you think about humans, you have human psychology, and then human brain is extremely complex. There is even this nice saying that the brain is a catch-22. If the brain was so simple we could understand it, we would be so simple that we couldn't. Okay, so I'm turning back to psychology. So again, I think psychology deals with a topic that is even more complex than biology. And then people cooperate and people compete. So what they form is some kind of dynamics in the society and the economy. And you could say that economics or sociology is even more complex, at least in terms of the object it's interested in than psychology, and especially so than biology or physics. So you would expect that, especially in social sciences and humanities, you would have more of dogmas being built. And it has been the case historically. It is to a certain extent the case even now. I don't know, for example, you can have psychoanalysis in psychology is a clear dogma without sufficient evidence. You could have certain schools of thought in philosophy, in economics as well. We have them. So we have them like the Austrian school or the post-Keynesian school. And if you perceive the science not as a means of explaining the reality, explaining the data that we have, but a battlefield of schools, it seems like dogmas are being already built around them. So that's all. Please share, comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you.